I was going to do my next video in my series on conflict and management today. But in light of what's happening in Ukraine, I'm going to talk about a very different kind of conflict instead, and how some people have been reacting to it. I've deliberately tried to tread lightly and be careful with what I say, even with the satirical stuff I've been trying to do lately, but I don't really care at this point. I've had enough. Nope. Get that off of there. No, we're not doing any of that. No graphics, music, or any crap like that. Not in the mood. And let's nix this background too. Get rid of it. Put something more appropriate up here. That's better. I made this myself while I was working toward Eagle almost 20 years ago. My father and grandfather stood by my side when I received the award in 2003. I wish they were here standing with me now. Especially my grandfather, who I know would have some choice words for Vladimir Putin in this situation. But I'll do my best to channel his spirit while I deliver these remarks. This one's for you, Papa. But even though I stand here alone right now, I stand confident that the sentiment I'm going to express is shared by millions of others. Even so, I'm sure some won't be happy with what I have to say or how I'm going to say it. But the way I see it, if you're more upset about what I say than about the people that are suffering and dying right now in Ukraine and elsewhere around the world, well, that says a lot more about you than it does about me. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in this area. I'm just speaking here as a normal everyday American who is sickened, disgusted, and off at what he's seeing. First, to anyone who doesn't think that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a big deal, I implore you to please pull your head out of your ass. This isn't a joke. This isn't a game. The lives of millions of people hang in the balance. A young woman whose mother had just been blown up, bawling, trying to figure out how to tell her father. A terrified young girl being quickly swept away by her mother and taken to the basement as bombs dropped all around them. A distraught father hugging his wife and young children as they leave to a safe zone while he stayed behind, all of them in tears, knowing they may never see each other again. These are just a few of the scenes I've seen that encapsulate what's actually happening. The impact is happening on real people on the ground. That's the most important thing here. These folks don't deserve any of this. But let's say you don't care about them at all. You think invading a sovereign country is cool? No problem whatsoever? Can't find any fault with it, huh? Putting aside how shitty that is, just in terms of basic humanity, you should care about this in terms of self-preservation alone. In case you haven't considered, let me spell it out for you. If there's a World War III, there will not be a World War IV, because it will be the last one. Why? What do we have to deal with now that we didn't have to deal with until the tail end of World War II? Nuclear weapons. Russia has enough nukes to destroy the entire planet many times over. If just one is fired, it'll trigger a chain reaction that will annihilate the whole planet. And quite frankly, I want my daughter to live and grow to see her adult years. And I want for your daughters and your sons too as well. And you don't think an open armed conflict like this dramatically increases the chances that a nuke could be fired, even if just by accident? Then you're being incredibly naive. But now the whole world is plunged into chaos with the greatest potential world conflict and risk of annihilation since World War II. All because a tiny, pathetic little man wanted to wave his dick around everywhere because he can't get over the fall of his once glorious Russian Empire. You couldn't just sit there and be rich and happy with all the money you stole from your people and so many others around the world with your organized crime buddies. No, you just have to try to put the Soviet Union back together again after 30 years. Well, wonderful. I guess this is the only card you wanted to play, huh? What if your goal was really to damage the influence of NATO, an alliance that only exists to protect against being invaded by Russia? The way to do that was certainly invading another country whose very reason to want to join NATO in the first place was because they were afraid of being attacked by Russia, thus validating the existence of NATO. Well done. Genius move. Or maybe it was never about NATO at all. Maybe it was just about power and influence. I'll be very happy the day your own people finally get sick of your bullshit and lynch your sorry ass. Now let's turn to some of these disgusting reactions I referred to. Let's start with you leftists who claim to hate American imperialism, but are just fine with Russia taking over another country by force. Who constantly talk about manufactured consent for war by the US government and US media, but just believe whatever propaganda is coming out of Russia? Are you kidding me? You don't see a contradiction there? Or does the calculus really just basically amount to US equals bad? Look, it's fair and reasonable to be skeptical of what's coming out of government intelligence agencies and the official government positions on things. And I'm all for criticizing actions taken by the US, especially when harm is caused either intentionally or unintentionally. I'm not one of those who says you can't criticize the government for anything. That's absolutely ridiculous. After all, we can't fix a problem if we don't recognize and learn from it. But how about some consistency? The US isn't all evil, and not everything the US does is bad. This kind of simplistic juvenile thinking is just the reverse, but at the same level of absurdity as thinking that the US is all good and can never do anything wrong. What you're essentially doing is serving as an apologist for a fascist regime. And what exactly is leftist about that? And what's it all for? A desperate attempt to try to show that you're right? To prove that you know something that everybody else doesn't? That you're smarter than everyone else? Well, I have news for you, you're not. Just because you're right about one or two things doesn't mean you're right about everything. You're one-trick ponies who apply the same shallow ideological lens to everything because you're too lazy or stupid to consider the nuances and complexities of real-world challenges. Speaking of lazily applying a tired, pathetic ideological lens to anything and everything, let's turn to the right now, and the assholes who have been actively cheerleading Putin and the reprehensible actions of his government. People like Tucker Carlson, like Donald Trump, who make everything about themselves without any care for what happens to innocent people. You've been running your mouths for years about an invasion by immigrants, namely Mexicans and Muslims, basically scary brown people. And now so many of you right-wingers can't seem to empathize with Ukrainians taking up arms to defend against an actual invasion? Really? Well, I mean, why should you, right? It's only one country just deciding to invade another based on the premise of a common shared ethnic heritage, the same blood and soil, if you will. We've seen these kind of arguments used before as an excuse for taking over other people's territory and repressing their population, and it didn't end well. Or maybe you're fine with that too. You disingenuously ask why so many of us don't really like Putin that much. Well, let me ask you a more relevant question. Why are you so quick to defend and even lavish praise on him? Is it because you actually identify with him? You actually admire him? Why? Because he hates the same people that you do? Or maybe there's something about his complexion that you can identify with. Or maybe it's because you wish you could do here what he did in Russia and is trying to do now in Ukraine. Just take over by force and impose your will on everyone else. To hold your knee onto the neck of those less powerful than you. Or maybe it's just as simple as bullies paying respect to other bullies. Well, to you stains on the underwear of life, who love authoritarian dictators so much you can't stop licking their boots, who are drawn to assholes like Putin so much that it's no longer possible to tell where his stops and your head begins, congratulations on being useful idiots. To Tucker Swanson specifically, you do realize that if you were actually in Russia under Putin, you wouldn't exist, right? That people like Putin and Viktor Orban aren't really known for allowing free expression of thought, which is why you were censored partially while you were there kissing his ass. That your constant criticism of the powers that be in the government, as long as they have a D by their name, of course, as is your right to do here, wouldn't really go over so well there. And you'd almost certainly be trading your mansions for broken stiff cots behind concrete walls and iron bars the moment you mouthed off to the wrong person. But I guess you found a grift that's working for you, so don't change the winning formula, right? Hope it's worth it. Piece of trash. And to the BS idea that somehow Putin wouldn't have done this if Trump were in office because Trump was such a strong leader that Putin wouldn't have dared. Perhaps that's partially true. Putin probably wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Trump were in office. Because if you have an ally as the US president who's constantly kissing your ass and giving you everything you want, there'd be no reason to invade. Or maybe Putin would have invaded anyway. And it's likely that Trump would have served the exact same role that he is now. Cheerleader. Stupid son of a talking about how brilliant Putin is. Putin is not somebody to be praised for being strategic or bold or daring. He's someone to be condemned for being a sick, demented piece of shit who couldn't actually lead his country and build it up, so instead he tries to hold everyone else down, the Russian people most of all. He's acting the way he is because he's a failure. It's a lot harder to build something up than it is to tear it down. It's a desperate attempt to seize power and influence by force because he's not capable of doing it any other way. Pathetic. Pathetic and incredibly dangerous. As I said, we've seen this before. My grandfathers stood up with millions of others and fought against it then. And I stand firmly against it now, as should all Americans. To the Russian people, we don't blame you. You're victims here too, and you deserve better. But you're the ones who can actually really put a stop to this. You have the power to rise up and demand a different course. To all the 18-year-olds who had guns put in your hands and were sent over the border to fight against your will, I implore you to do as many of your fellow countrymen already have. Put down your arms, leave your equipment, and just walk away. I'm sure the Ukrainian people will gratefully accept you. I understand that's all so easy for me to say over here when I don't actually have to do it. Criticism fully acknowledged and accepted. But it's still true. Everything is on the line here. For us and for you. To the Ukrainian people, we the American people support you. Granted, we obviously can't stand there next to you in person. God, I wish we could. I understand why we can't. And we don't always express it as well as we could or should. But the vast majority of us are sickened by what you're going through and want you to be safe and free. Stand strong. Hold the line. It may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen this year. But kick their asses and send them packing out of your home. And to the Tucker Carlsons, to the Donald Trumps, to the self-absorbed fascist cheerleaders who'd rather transparently cast blame on Biden for Putin's actions in a naked attempt to score cheap political points in a time of international crisis than actually show some tact and basic humanity. But most of all, to Vladimir Putin and his merry band of rich jack friends, I would just like to say, in the words of an incredibly brave Ukrainian soldier just before he was murdered, from the bottom of my heart, go fuck yourself. See you next time.